I'm Miranda Maverick, and I'm chatting with Staxx.
Welcome to this episode of Chattin with Staxx. I'm your host, Bill Staxx, and today I got Miranda Maverick.
Hello, everybody.
Hello.
Hello.
How are you? I've had it out with a doctor over my mom with the cancer and all that. He was just being real abrasive and like, come on, man, have a heart a little bit.
Yeah, it's like you have a family too, right? Like you don't want to talk to this. I'm a 20-year-old kid at the time, and they're just like, yeah, you're probably never gonna fight again. Definitely not gonna have kids again. Never gonna do athletics again. I was just like, this is my whole life. You're telling me, just shattering right in front of me as I'm bawling, and they're continuing to talk, and I'm sure they've done it to many others in worse circumstances, of course. But those are the two main injuries I've had. Nothing else.
What was it from? What was the retina from? Getting hit?
Yeah. I went to a gym that was pretty old school as far as you need to just get tougher. If you get knocked out, you should have just moved your head a little bit more.
Oh, man.
Yeah. And we're 90% positive that's what it's from. The doctors could tell it was pretty recent scar tissue around my eyes. And I got poked in the eyes a couple times really badly, and that causes it a lot too. So yeah, still dealing with issues from that. It's still very scary every time I fight. I'm at much higher risk than I'd say 95% of fighters as far as my eyes go. So I'm very careful, but like my Jasmine fight that I had a while back that I lost 2 fights ago, I actually went blind in my left eye during that fight, and it wasn't from an eye poke or anything, just like a punch that hit me right in the right spot to where my retina back there blew up again just from all the scar tissue around it and stuff. So again, it's very scary every time I fight. I have a big risk every time I go in there. And that's part of the reason that I'm trying to get as far as I can, as fast as I can. And I keep all my other options open. I have another full-time job at the same time. That way I don't just have nothing as soon as I decide I'm not fighting. And I feel like a lot of fighters don't have any other avenues in life.
Yeah, well, you're like a set aside from the rest, because a lot of people at the young age that you're at, they don't focus on their career. Like, I'm going to do this. I've noticed that about you. You're like, you even said it on the mic. I'm going to do this. I'm going to be the next big thing. I don't care what anybody says.
Yep, exactly.
Have you had doubters back then? Did you have people doubting you? Like, you can't go to the
UFC. Doubt me. People doubt me all the time, but my whole life, it's always been, you're too young to do that. You should enjoy life more. You should do this. And I always have just laughed in the face of that because it's always been the opposite for me. I'm like, yes, I am young. Thus, I can go after this stuff as hard as I can. I don't have a family yet. And by family, I mean like kids and stuff that I have to focus on more than myself. It's my time to be selfish, I guess you would say, but in turn, from being selfish now, able to help more in the future with my family, able to help my siblings, able to help my parents in the future. And I need to go after that as much as I can. Right now, I'm willing to have 2 jobs while also fighting in the UFC. I'm willing to do that and wake up early. And eventually, I'm sure I'll get sick of that. So I might as well do it while the motivation's there and while I can and while I'm healthy. And I'm one of those people that I know I've been given abilities. I know I've had great blessings in life and these opportunities to be put in front of me. And I'm not a person who's going to let them go to waste by being lazy. So if my hard work can pay off enough to make the most of those opportunities, then I'm going to work as absolutely hard as I can to make it happen.
I'm the same way. Same way. So, who are some of your inspirations from back in the day when you were first coming up? What were some of the people you look up to?
I always get that question, and honestly, like fighter-wise, I just didn't really have many inspirations as far as people. It was kind of self-inspiration, my family. My dad was always similar in attitude to what I am. He always pushed me to be better and better, and he always jokes that that's probably why I have so many problems now. Like I'm one of those stressed very easy. I'm like, everything has to be perfect. And it was because when I was young, he would push me to do better. I would show him a drawing, for instance, and he's like, that's really good. I bet you could improve this, and I bet you could improve that. And it wasn't like he was being mean. Most people would be like, he's controlling, he's mean. But I'd always be like, oh, you're right. Yeah, I'll go try again. And I was that kid that would go try again and make it better. and make it better. And he'd be like, why don't you lift this? It's a little bit heavier. Why don't you put this in your backpack and climb the monkey bars? And now make it heavier and climb the monkey bars. Like the littlest things when I was small. And it kind of just led to when I was older, doing better and expecting more out of myself and having higher expectations for myself. And as a result, I kind of hold those around me to higher expectations too. And I have to kind of learn who's who and who I can hold to what expectations, of course, because if I held everyone to my own expectations, it wouldn't be a very fun,
They fall short every time, right?
yeah. And that's like you said, people are mean to me, but I'm the meanest to myself, right? Like I really am. Like I'm like, I did terrible in that fight. I could have won in the first round with a submission, and I'd still probably look at it and go, no, that was trash. Right. And others are like, what are you talking about? And I'm like, well, it's not the best I could have done, so it's trash, and they're like, oh, okay, that's a weird mindset. And I'm like, yeah, but it helps me be better.
That's awesome. A lot of people don't put that. A lot of I don't know, I can't speak for other people, but a lot of people probably don't put that on kids. They don't teach them that. Like, you can do better, keep doing better, push yourself.
Nowadays it's almost like considered child abuse and stuff. They're like, oh, let the kid do what they want. And I'm like, no, that's not going to lead to good things for them. I'm a Christian. I believe that disciplining your child is a good thing. I believe that teaching them right and wrong is a good thing, and having them live up to their own abilities. If you let somebody just go do whatever they want in life, they're probably not going to do that much, because all that most of us want at the end of the day is just laziness, and it's like, cool, you've got to know how to push yourself. And as a child, you learn a lot of those things.
Yeah. So who do you look at as competition in your field of work now?
Everybody ahead of me right now, everybody even in my division. If they say they're a 125er, a 135er, a 115er, I'm looking, I'm watching, right? Of course, I have a couple names that I see as rivals. Like right now, I want to fight Andrea Lee. Her and I have both agreed to fight. Just waiting on the matchmaker. I don't know why I don't have a fight scheduled yet. It's been quite frustrating, but just waiting around, hoping I get a fight anytime soon. Whether they're unranked, ranked, people are like, why don't you call out somebody ranked? And I'm like, cool, I'd love that. If I get somebody ranked, awesome. But I'm not getting paid better from getting ranked people. I get paid the same regardless. So I'm just here to make the money, to use this as a means to the end and go be the best I can be in the process. If I get number 5 in the world that I get to fight, awesome. If I get number 80 in the world, awesome. I don't care. Like, let's fight, go in there, put on a show. It's an entertainment industry above all, and that's what I'm trying to do, is entertain and go be the best I can be.
How do they match you up to your competition? Like, how is the matchup? Do they just pick a name out of a hat?
I don't know. I mean, sometimes they'll be like, we think this is a good matchup because of style or because of rankings, but a lot of time it's so random. Like, I stay ready for short notice fights 90% of the time. So if you guys ever pay attention, I think it's been 6 out of 8 of my fights have been short notice in the UFC. And short notice can mean anywhere from like 3 weeks or less, right? So my Aaron Blanchfield fight was short notice. My Sabina Mazo, my Shani Young, Priscilla Cachoeira, several of my fights have been short notice, and half of those that I said have been under 10 days. So it's like I just go in there and fight very quickly. So I go in there and take whoever they give me. And sometimes people say no. I've had that happen a lot too. But the matchmaker will say, will you take this one? Because they know I'll take short notice. And I'll say, sure, let's do it.
Yeah, and that's insane. Have you had people drop out of the fights right before you're supposed to go on?
Oh, twice. Wait, 3 times. But I've had 2 of them drop out the day before the fight. And I've had one of them drop out the day of my fight, 30 minutes before we were basically supposed to fight. It was insane.
Was she in the building?
We were in the lobby getting ready to go to the thing. So I guess it wasn't 30 minutes, but like an hour and 30 minutes before we were literally going out there into the cage. And we were getting ready to load on the buses, and I got a message that said, sorry, I'm feeling rough. But, she ended up still taking the fight later. We rebooked it 3 weeks later, which was still short notice. And it sucked for me because my weight cut was terrible. I was very sick afterwards because I'm a lot bigger than a lot of the other 25ers. So for her, it was an easy turnaround for the weight cut. It was Jillian Robertson. It's public knowledge, so I don't need to not say it. But she dropped out the day of the fight, and they asked me to fight the very next weekend. And I was like, are you freaking kidding me? Like, no, I'm already back up to 140. Like that's not
Yeah,
gonna
so then you'd have to cut again to get back in there, right?
exactly. But we ended up booking it for 3 weeks out, and I still got pretty sick, just from my body having that high emotion. I mean, we're an hour and a half from the fight. I'm ready to
Your
go.
anxiety's going,
Yeah,
everything's
yeah.
pumping.
Like a whole roller coaster. And for me being a little bit heavier than she was by probably, 8 pounds as far as what our regular walk around weight was, it was just a rough cut. But got there, went into the fight, and was quite sick afterwards for a couple weeks just because my body had taken some damage from 2 weight cuts back to back.
Yeah, what's it like cutting weight?
Miserable. It's the most miserable part of the sport, I always say. And there's not too many great fixes to it. People will say hydration tests, they'll say all kinds of things. And I'm like, there's ways around so many of those things people don't understand. Like, I can still be fairly hydrated for an hour while I'm tested and then go right back to dehydrating myself. And if you had them weigh right before they walked into the cage, what happens if they miss weight right then and there? You just cancel the fight on the spot. Like, how are you going to deal with that stuff? So just a lot of questions of how's the right way to do it. And I think a lot of it's just making it healthy weight cuts, having medical teams standing by able to teach us about it. But weight cuts are the hardest part of it. I finally found my home at 125. Back when the UFC only had 115 and 135, that was rough for a lot of ladies. I know even myself, I was starting into professional fighting at the time. And I was like, well, my goal is the UFC. So I've got to pick a weight class, either 115 or 135. And I tried to do 115 for 3 of my pro fights. The one that I actually made weight for ended up being canceled the day of the fight, which sucked. It was a local event, and the lady I think she expected me to miss weight. That was part of the contract, is if I missed weight, the fight would automatically be off and she would get my whole purse. And I was confident that I knew I was going to make weight because I'd actually prepared for that one, that I was like, all right, deal. And then I made weight. Her coaches found out about it, and all of a sudden she had a concussion. So
Do you get paid if that happens? Like, what
you should,
happens?
unless there are some crappy, tiny promotions. And at the time, it was just a local, nobody promotion that was there for about 5 months and dropped out. And I got paid barely anything, like just a percentage of my ticket sales I had sold. So very frustrating moment, of course. But the other 2 times I tried to make 115, I missed weight. And that was for Invicta. And so that was really disappointing. But the reason I did it was because the UFC didn't have a 125-pound division, and I wanted to show up and show out in a division they had. And I remember the day that UFC made 125, I was like, never again. I'm going to 125 only. I'm never cutting a 115 again.
Just too much, right? Too much on your body. And
Well, it's like I had to lose muscle, it wasn't just fat or anything like that. I'm very lean at 125. And yeah, it's miserable even cutting a 125, with saunas and sauna suits and water loading and water cutting and salt loading and salt cutting. And people have to understand, though, we're not losing the weight. We're cutting the weight. It's very temporary. If we stayed at that weight for more than like 24 hours, we'd probably have to be taken to the hospital.
yeah. So when you are fighting someone else, what are some of the injuries you've seen other people you've given to other people? You do some damage to these people.
I've broken a lot of arms in my career. A lot of arms.
What's it like breaking someone's arm?
Oh, it's terrible. Honestly, the worst injury I've given anyone was just a couple weeks ago. I still feel terrible about it, to be honest. And it was just in a jiu-jitsu match. I did a heel hook, tore her ankle and her knee up, and that is terrible because I know, as someone who got my knee completely reconstructed, you're out at least 6 months to a year, and she was another younger girl up and coming in jiu-jitsu, and I felt bad, but those things are so dangerous. That's part of what our sport has a risk in. And jiu-jitsu competitions, I don't even like hurting anyone because it's we don't get paid enough for that. There's enough pay in that aspect of the sport to get hurt. But in fighting, I'm I'll rip it off. I don't care. If you're not going to tap, I'll rip it off until the ref gets me off of them. And I'm nice. If anybody's watched the Priscilla Cachoeira fight, I had the arm bar and I'm sitting there holding her arm, breaking it, but very slow. I go very slow every time I do this stuff because I'm please tap. Can please tap? I don't.
You're waiting for them to tap.
Yeah, it's go in there with purely cold-hearted, I'm gonna rip your arm off. I'm I don't want to necessarily hurt anyone. I want us to both be safe, but I will if it means that's how my paycheck gets given to me.
Now, do you hear pop? Pop?
A lot of times it pops a lot, and then you'll feel like tendons rip, and that's when it actually like breaks, you know, and you'll feel like just a crunch kind of. It's like, and that's when it's.
Wow. Have you had somebody get their arm broken, not tap still?
No, never had that happen. No, thank goodness. I've had somebody that's double jointed before, and that was pretty scary because their arm popped out, but they were fine, and so I had to like crunch it with their shoulder. And then yeah, I've only broken one bone with their arms. Usually their elbow joint will just come out, right? But I'm done talking about that. You're gonna make me all.
Oh, that's great.
I've passed
So,
out a lot of people with chokes. I've broken several arms, and I've hurt 2 ankles, but you know that's not too bad. Those heal pretty fast, and now I've torn up 1 knee, which I hate.
have you ever destroyed someone's face?
I've bloodied them a few times, 2
Yeah.
broken noses, and you know hurt eyes, but never to the point it was terrible. Obviously, my UFC debut, I busted Liana's nose pretty good, and people are always like, "Oh, it was just a broken nose." I'm like, "That's not why the doctor stopped it. If anybody watched the fight, it was the whole nose right here. The skin was peeled down, and even in her next fight against Courtney Casey, the exact same injury was reopened after just a couple punches because the skin on her nose was so thin after it all had to be sewed back, basically. So people should you know, not comment if they don't know the full stuff, but I get how it looks versus how it is. It's like, oh, she's a girl, so they stopped the fight because she had a broken nose, whoop-de-doo. And I'm like, there's a little bit more than that. But her whole career was basically stopped from that, which, again, I feel bad as that was the result, but also it was a good win. And the strategy was to basically do the elbows.
Yeah. So I want to ask you about the judges. How do you feel about the people who are judging the fight and their qualifications? Do you think that they're qualified to judge these fights? And if you don't think that, what's the answer?
You know, there's the answers to both. The judges are sometimes qualified, and a lot of times they are not. A lot of times they've just been judges for other sports, say boxing, and so they're like, boom, automatically qualified for MMA. And I think there should definitely be a more formal training for MMA fights. You know, from what I've heard, speaking to actual judges, like local ones, state commissions, because you know, as fighters, we become friends with the states that we compete in a lot. The commission basically knows our first name. Like we get on a talking basis and talk in the back before the fights and stuff. And so we know them. And a lot of them are like, yeah, there's not really training. It'll be like, here's the rules, go. And it's like, why don't we have a system to where they have to watch, let's say 3 fights. Let's say that one ends up being by majority, you know, decision, a good decision where it's a clear win. One's a clear, like one's a draw, and then one's close. And let's see what the refs give that. And if they judge it completely wrong, do not hire them as a judge, right? Like that's how it should be. It should be like they have to go through some form of testing where they get it right. It's not just like I stared at my phone. That girl's pretty. Give her the win. You know, like that's not how. And sometimes I really do wonder. I'm like, did they confuse who was who in there? Or were they not watching this part? You know, are they literally looking at their phone the whole time? I don't know what goes on. So I think there needs to be that kind of training where they have a form of testing beyond just what the rule set is. I think it needs to be a form of testing, like example fights they watch, and they have to score it. And if they don't score it close to what it should be, then done, right? Obviously, love it if it was retired fighters or people who train a part of the sport, but you can't guarantee that, right? And a lot of fighters are like, I don't get paid enough to do that. You know, I'm not going to do that after I retire. Some do. Some go and do it and they coach and stuff like that. And that's awesome when they do. But I don't think that should be a requirement. Just better training for sure.
Like Dan Black, I was interviewing him recently, and he said he was talking to the judge, and he said, "Why did you score like that?" He said, "Well, I seen him do this." And he goes, "Do you even know what he did?" And he said, "No." And he's like, didn't even know what the fighter was doing. Like he didn't know the moves.
Yeah, it's sad. Not only that, but like they'll see pressure as being way more important than damage and stuff like that. There just needs to be a common rule set in MMA and common training. You know, it needs to be beyond just what the rule set is. You can't be just an average Joe off the street. But maybe if you train in the sport or have some aspect of training, just like any job, you should have to fulfill the experience requirement, right? Because it doesn't even require education. I don't think it should anyway. I don't care if you have no GED and you go in there and you know what the fighting is like, then boom, you're going to be a better judge.
Yeah. So can you explain one thing about yourself that people would be surprised to know?
There's a lot of things actually, but one thing that I find kind of fun is I say that I'm not just one form of an artist. I'm a mixed martial artist and I'm also a pencil sketch artist. So those people who don't know me very well, I've actually had my own pencil sketching business since I was 11 years old. I've been drawing and I did a self-portrait for a school project. And what I was talking about with my dad having high expectations, right? I
Right.
had a self-portrait project when I was young in middle school, I think it was. And instead of tracing it like they told us to, like using a window or whatever, I decided to just try to draw it freehand of myself. And so here I am, 11 years old, using a mechanical pencil is all, and learning shading and using my finger to like shade in and everything. And I brought it home. I ended up winning like all these prizes at the fair and stuff. Brought it home, and my dad was just like, "What? You drew that?" And I was like, "Yeah, I did in a few hours." And he was like, "Do it again." He's like, somebody else. He's like, "You should draw again and draw again." And after 3 times, he's like, "You should start selling these." And my mom was all for it. She got me a couple of people at her work to buy some. So, there's at least 10 people in the US that have my drawings that they bought from me for like $10 somewhere in their house. Let me tell you, it's more valuable now.
Probably is.
Yeah.
Probably is. If you got any of those drawings, send me an email. I want to see a picture
Hey,
of
there you
them.
go. You'll have to go check it out though. If anybody's listening and want to go check out my art, it is Maverick_masterpieces on Instagram. And I'm in the midst of drawing one right now, actually, but I have all of my newer art on there right now.
That's so awesome.
Thanks.
It really is. So I wish you nothing but success in the future. It's you have an incredible career. It's insane, and you got a big fan over here, 100%.
I appreciate it.
Do you want to give anyone a shout out before we go?
Yeah, sure. I'm going to be a little selfish again and just say if you guys are interested in getting any gear from me, I make my own designs and my own merchandise. I have everything from shirts to hats to rash guards at fearthemaverick.net. I actually have on sale, if you guys use my code Maverick10 between now and Christmas, you can get 10% off of my website. So fearthemaverick.net, I'm sending stuff out in the next 2 weeks. So please go on there, order some stuff, even if it's something little just to support.
Black Friday. Don't forget Black Friday.
Yeah, there
Go
you
get
go.
a
I don't
Christmas
necessarily have a
present.
special code for that, but you could use the 10% Maverick 10 on there.
I really appreciate you, and I wish you nothing but success in the future. Maybe I'll pop in on one of your fights. You'll be like, "Wow,
Yeah.
that's Staxx. Is that the fight? Wow."
That would be awesome. Thank you.
I really appreciate you. Have a great day, and nothing but success in the future.
Thank you. I wish you the best too. Thank you.
Thank you. If you guys like this show, hit the like, subscribe, and notification bell so you can get my videos every time they drop. And if you don't, start your own podcast. Peace. Thank you.